I have a crush on someone, but he doesn't like me. I was distressed by this and went to talk to my brother. He sneered and raised his eyes. If you like it, just go for it, you wimp. I nodded. That makes sense. So that night, I tied my brother to the bed. His loud cursing was crushed by me. In the end, he could only sob and beg for mercy. I'm your brother. I met his angry gaze and kissed his sweaty forehead. I know, baby. At the board meeting, I kicked the door open. A group of old men were surrounding my brother and talking nonstop, trying to persuade him to get married. For the sake of the group, what's wrong with sacrificing some personal feelings? Thomas Campbell had a serious look on his face and was about to nod when he was interrupted by my kicking on the door. The person who was talking excitedly turned around and saw me, and suddenly fell silent, curling back into his chair like a fat quail. I hooked my foot over his chair and patted his shoulder with a sneer. I think, Christopher Rogers, you still have your charm. How about sending you to a marriage? Christopher smiled awkwardly, his face wrinkled into a ball. I'm too old to be suitable. Thanks to my reputation as the little overlord of Jiangqing and the fact that I was a crazy racing fan, I had nothing to worry about. These guys on the board never dare to go against me. I sat lazily on the table in the conference room, swinging my legs. If anyone forces him to go on a blind date again, why not come to me? I'm happy to go on a blind date at your house. A group of people looked at the wide open door and fled, fearing that they would be spotted by me. Once upon a time, there was a manager who was middle-aged, greasy like a piece of fat pork belly, and harassed his female subordinates. I sent a bunch of steel wallflowers to his home, and his strong wife treated him so well that he was completely subdued and had a bruised face. Since then, the floral language of steel wool has been widely circulated between me, Sophia Gray, and Nicholas, and it can be called a magical artifact. After everyone had left, only the two of us brothers were left in the meeting room. Thomas, who had been silent the whole time, frowned and said, "Kneel down." My nose suddenly felt sore, and I moved closer to him and knelt down obediently. Although Thomas didn't show much expression, based on my understanding of him, I knew he was very angry. He sipped on his cigarette and kicked me in the chest. "Kneel further away." The kick was not strong, so I pretended to be hurt and held his ankle tightly. "Brother, it hurts. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Why isn't it killing you? Are you really willing to do anything now?" I lowered my head and looked humble, looking pitiful and well-behaved. This is the one I'm most familiar with. My parents died young, and Thomas raised me since I was a child. Having been beaten by him countless times since childhood, I have already learned my lesson. I hugged his legs and couldn't help but kiss him. "Anyway, you can't get married." Thomas put out his cigarette, frowned irritably, and kicked me away. "What are you going back to do?" I knelt on the ground, kneeling straight and straight. I should have been in Los Angeles training for a competition, but when I heard that my brother was getting married, I rushed back. "But you certainly can't tell the truth." My eyebrows drooped. "I've been having a rough time lately." My brother sat up straight and looked at me. I continued to play the victim and looked up at him. Thomas looked cool and indifferent under the light, with long, slender eyelashes. The lips that have just been smoking are so red that one can't help but want to kiss them hard and make them even redder. "Are you in love?" "No, I just fell in love with someone, but that person doesn't like me." The air fell silent. Thomas frowned and lit another cigarette, tapping the tabletop with his fingertips intermittently. This was a sign of his usual impatience. After a long while, he sneered and raised his eyes. "If you like it, just go for it, you wimp." Just go for it if you like it? I had been anxious for so long about how to confess my feelings to my brother, and suddenly it all clicked. I've never thought of it that way, but my brother is right. What else? Thomas scolded me with a frown. "Are you willing to be friends with them? Are you in need of friends?" I nodded seriously. "That makes sense." So that night, I invited my brother to dinner. It was already dark when my brother came back from the company exhausted. With his suit still draped over his arm, he glanced around the hotel room. "You're going to treat me to a meal here?" I nodded and asked the hotel to deliver the meal. The waiter pushed in a cart full of dishes and brought a bottle of fine foreign wine. During the whole meal, I kept pouring wine for my brother. It was not until he was halfway through eating that he remembered to ask me, "Didn't you say you were chasing someone?" "I'm chasing you." Thomas's hand holding the glass trembled, and the wine spilled on the back of his hand. The color of the whiskey was crystal clear under the light. "After dinner? I'm chasing you now." My brother was already a little tipsy from what I had gotten him. He was slow to react and glanced around the room before speaking in confusion. "Where are the people?" "You are a human being, aren't you?" Thomas thought for a while, then suddenly stood up and looked at me in disbelief. "You fucking say that again?" Seeing that his hands were shaking with anger, I pulled him over and couldn't help but kiss the back of his hand to wipe off the wine. The spicy and stimulating taste permeates the mouth, mixed with a hint of sweetness. My heart was beating rapidly. When Thomas was shocked and wanted to pull his hand back, I had already pressed his hand on my heart, letting him feel my chaotic heartbeat. "Brother, I like you." That one sentence made Thomas freeze in place. After a long time, he suddenly paced around the room like an ant on hot pan. He yanked off his tie anxiously, looking broken-hearted. "We are both men." "I know. I don't like men, and I'm not interested in women. I only like you." I stood there obediently, blocking the doorway inconspicuously, for fear that he would run away. "I have booked a flight to the United States for tomorrow. There is still a game waiting for me, and I have to beat my brother tonight. This is my plan for today's day." For this reason, I also went to find a website for in-depth learning, striving to give my brother a good first experience. My brother was anxious for a long time, but there was nothing he could do. He could only sit dejectedly on the sofa and began to persuade me earnestly. "Not the two of us. But we are not brothers." My real brother had long since passed away in a car accident along with my parents. Thomas is the child of my parents' benefactor and replaced my brother after his parents passed away. At the age of 15, Thomas took on the responsibility of raising me. From the time I was 10 to 24, we depended on each other. They are the only people in this world who can fill out the surgery consent form for each other. He raised me and is the most important person in my life. I couldn't accept him being with someone else. What I cannot tolerate even more is that there is someone closer to him than me. Joshua Stewart. Seeing that I was not listening, Thomas became furious and veins bulged on his clenched fists. I said no means no. His rejection made me feel a lump in my throat and tears started to fall. Seeing me crying, my brother was a little stunned. The words of refusal were stuck in my mouth and I couldn't say them. I cried for a while and started to apologize. "Brother, I'm sorry." Then, before he could even expect it, I lifted him onto my shoulders, crying, and ran straight to the bedroom. Although my brother is 1.80 meters tall, he is rather thin, and I can easily subdue him with my height of 1.9 meters. I used all my strength, and my brother couldn't break free, yelling, "You bastard!" I tilted my head, looked at his face which was red from his struggle, and kissed him contentedly. "Yeah, I'm an asshole." Thomas is usually aloof and quiet, and I rarely see him lose control of his emotions. At this moment he was avoiding my kiss, but I invaded him by pressing the back of his head. The tip of my tongue was bitten and it hurt, and the taste of blood filled my mouth. I pressed harder on his waist and the back of his head, almost pulling him into my arms, unwilling to back off even a step. I'm betting that my brother won't bear to bite off my tongue or hurt me. Sure enough, the smell of blood became stronger and stronger, and blood began to flow from my lips. Thomas's expression changed and his teeth loosened, which gave me the opportunity to move forward. The rusty-smelling blood mixed with saliva was exchanged between us. My body temperature rose rapidly and my skin was terribly hot. Holding my brother's thin and narrow waist tightly, my heart felt like it was being filled up little by little with honey, sweet to the point of overflowing. After a deep kiss, my brother became much more obedient. He leaned in my arms, panting with weak limbs and watery eyes. It wasn't until I started to unbuckle his belt that he started to struggle again. "Be good, don't move." My brother wouldn't listen and continued to raise his hands to stop me from touching him. Helplessly, I tilted my head and took his earlobe in my mouth and sucked it gently. My brother's face turned red from his neck to his ears in an instant, and his hands that were trying to push me became weak. I took the opportunity to untie his tie and tied his hands and locked him to the bed. My brother kept scolding me for as long as the lights were on that night. I refuted his cursing and kissed him passionately. In the end, he bit his lips tightly to prevent himself from making any strange sounds. His eyes were staring blankly at the ceiling, and his whole body looked like he had been fished out of the water. I could only whimper and beg for mercy to awaken my conscience. "I'm your brother." I met his angry gaze and kissed his sweaty forehead. "I know, baby. From the day I knew I liked you. Brother, you can only be mine." When it was dawn, I carried the limp Thomas to the bathroom to wash up. When he touched the warm water, he moaned and fell asleep again. In the bathtub, I held him in my arms and kissed the side of his neck gently, leaving marks here and there to declare my sovereignty. When I wake up, I will go back to the United States, and it will take another week for me to come back. He is clearly in my arms at this moment, but I always feel a sense of loss. This feeling of fear of loss and gain makes my heart ache, and I urgently need to ask for it to relieve my inner anxiety. I lowered my eyes to look at Thomas. Even though he was asleep, his brows were frowning. But compared to when he is sober, his softness and obedience at this moment makes me more intoxicated. After looking at him for a while, I smoothed his frowning brows, reached out and pinched his neck tightly, then kissed him to wake him up. "So," Thomas groaned, his voice choked and hoarse. In the water, he could only hold my arms weakly and let me kiss him deeper. The water in the bathtub was stirred up by my movements and spilled all over the floor. The scene that I have dreamed of countless times since I was a child has become a reality today. I hugged Thomas tightly, holding him in my arms, feeling his presence to offset the disappointment of our impending separation. I sighed until his breathing became long and even, and kissed his earlobe. "Brother, please like me." When I woke up, my brother was gone. The time was so short that I suspected he didn't sleep at all. But I had no choice but to board the return flight to participate in the competition. Maybe it's because I feel good after getting what I wanted. In this year's 24 cumulative races, I ranked first in total points. When the news of my victory spread across the country, countless friends sent me messages to congratulate me. The only one missing is my brother's. I called him. I didn't answer the call, but luckily I wasn't blocked. After I landed back in China, I was surrounded by fans who came to greet me at the airport. When I returned to China in the past, my brother would always come to pick me up no matter how busy he was. This time, I took photos and signed autographs for every fan, but 5 hours passed and I still didn't see him. After leaving the airport, I drove straight to the company, but was stopped by my special assistant when I reached the top floor. "Thomas is busy and doesn't have time to see you." He stubbornly stood in front of me and refused to retreat. At this moment, the sound of women laughing could be vaguely heard in Thomas's office. In an instant, several guesses flashed through my mind. The anger accumulated in my heart little by little, and it clouded my mind. I couldn't control my emotions anymore, so I pushed my special assistant away and kicked the door open despite his attempts to stop me. In Thomas's office, a woman was half lying on his sofa, talking on the phone. She looked at me for a moment, then hung up the phone with a look of surprise. It seems that he doesn't understand why I am so angry. "Joshua?" I didn't expect she knew me. I raised my eyes and scanned the office, looking for my brother. But Thomas was not in the office. I couldn't hold back the bitterness in my heart, and my voice was choked when I asked, "Where's my brother?" When she heard me ask about Thomas, the woman smiled shyly and her cheeks flushed. "He's taking a shower." In an instant, my anxious heart felt like it was poured with ice water, chilling me from my heart to my whole body, and even my fingertips were cold. Only then did I hear the sound of gurgling water coming from the room behind the office. "What's wrong with you? Don't cry." The woman screamed in surprise and quickly handed me a tissue. "My face is a little wet." When I touched my face, I realized that I was crying. At this moment, the sound of shower in the room suddenly stopped, and my brother came out in a bathrobe and looked at me coldly. "Brother." I opened my mouth and found that my voice was terribly hoarse. "Don't you want me anymore?" I couldn't hold back and cried even harder. Can you be more promising? Thomas frowned irritably and told his special assistant to send the woman away first. As soon as the person left, I rushed to my brother, hugged his legs and cried. You really don't want me anymore? You can't leave me, brother. You are the only one I have. Thomas's eyes were cold at first, but they softened after hearing the last sentence, and he patted my shoulders soothingly. We will always be brothers. That day. He paused, thinking of something, and his ears turned red again. Just treat it as an accident. We stopped the loss in time. Our brotherly relationship will not be affected. As you can see, that was my girlfriend just now. I don't like men, so you should. Before Thomas could finish his words, I knocked him out with a knife. When the special assistant returned to the office, it was empty. I was driving on the highway and my brother was sleeping in the back seat wrapped in a bathrobe. The open neckline of the bathrobe revealed a few red marks and bite marks on the delicate collarbone. That's what I left over from last time. I absolutely don't believe that my brother has a girlfriend. Thomas was indifferent and distant. I had never seen him be close and gentle to anyone except me since I was a child. They all lied to me. And this matter has been verified. In a cabin on a deserted island somewhere, I held my brother's ankles and listened to him scolding me. Thomas woke up from his sleep and passed out again. This was repeated several times. He finally couldn't bear it anymore and began to beg for mercy. I began to press him for the truth. Is that woman really your girlfriend? If you don't tell the truth, I won't stop. It's my girlfriend. I reached out and turned him over. She's really my girlfriend. I held his waist tightly and picked him up. Thomas finally admitted defeat, speaking incoherently. No, I lied to you. I kissed his sweaty cheek contentedly. Baby is awesome. Thomas no longer had the energy to argue with me. He raised his head and gasped for air, his eyes blank. After a while, he finally came to his senses and looked at the bleak furnishings in the room. Where is this? On a deserted island. Thomas's pupils gradually dilated and he sat up, looking around for something. Where's my phone? I picked up the phone and waved it in front of him. Don't look for it. This is an uninhabited area. There is no signal. Thomas suddenly lost his temper and fell weakly on the bed. How long do you plan to keep me here? I don't want to lock you up. I just want us to have an environment where we can develop our relationship without being disturbed. So you're going to wait until I fall in love with you before you let me go? Then let's all die here. I was overjoyed. Are you willing to grow old with me till death do us part? My brother. At first, I thought the trip to the primeval forest would quickly deepen our love. But I didn't expect that after sleeping that day, my brother was hungry. Is there anything to eat? After walking around the room twice, I took out a bag of rice. My brother looked like he was going to break. I froze in place. I came in such a hurry this time that I forgot to prepare the food. Can you cook? I froze in place again. No. My brother looked completely shattered. An hour later, I finally built a fire and grilled the fish I caught. My brother looked at the slightly burnt fish with disdain and took a small bite. Then he threw it 2 miles away. I was still grilling fish. My brother sneered at me and said, "Well done." I didn't dare to breathe, staring at the fish in my hand, praying that it wouldn't burn. When I was in college, Nicholas Ramirez and I often went sea fishing, and we were pretty good at it. But the fish caught were always handed over to servants and I never did it myself. Thomas stood up and turned around, looking at the endless sea around him. How did you bring me here? I came by car, then by helicopter, and finally by yacht. Beautiful. Thomas clapped his hands. I worked so hard to earn money to send you to learn these hobbies, and in the end, you spent all the money on me, right? I didn't dare say a word and lowered my head even lower. In the end, Thomas was hungry all night and only ate some porridge. Originally, I wanted to cook rice, but due to my lack of experience and poor control over the amount of water, it turned into porridge. At night, I wanted to hug my brother to sleep, but as soon as I got close to him, I got slapped in the face. My face was burning with pain and my brother told me to get out coldly. That night, after my brother fell asleep, I searched the island all night with a flashlight and brought back a lot of mushrooms. I made stewed mushroom porridge with grilled fish for my brother this morning. With the umami flavor of mushrooms, my brother finally agreed to eat a few bites. Maybe he was very hungry, so he ate a full bowl. After eating and drinking, my brother lay on the yacht to bask in the sun. I looked at his exposed upper body, my Adam's apple moved unconsciously, and I swallowed my saliva. After yesterday, new scars are added to the old ones. Plus, my brother has these blue and red marks on his body that are incredibly beautiful. I was originally massaging his legs. At this moment, every cell in my body was screaming wildly and my hands were also distracted. When the passion reached its climax, my brother climbed onto my neck and sweated profusely. But he suddenly opened his eyes and looked at me blankly. "You are a fox? How come you have a furry tail?" As he said this, he touched the top of my head. "And ears." For a moment I was sweating all over. "Brother, are you okay?" "I'm fine. It's weird that the fish next to me can actually walk." I subconsciously looked at the pot of finished mushroom porridge. Because the portion was not large and my brother was eating more, I only ate the grilled fish. I watched my brother see more and more sea creatures talking to him. I jumped off the deck with a roar and drove the yacht back. When I got to a place where I could contact the outside world, I hurriedly made a phone call. As soon as we reached the shore, the ambulance took my brother away. Fortunately, this was a hallucination caused by mild mushroom poisoning and was not serious. My brother and I's first sweet journey was also forced to be interrupted. When my brother woke up, his eyes lit up when he saw the hospital ward. After returning to Jiangxing, he had no time to scold me or deal with his work. I ate like crazy at various Michelin restaurants in Jiangxing for 3 days. After I came back, my brother blocked me directly. They even changed the door code and wouldn't let me go home. After a week of unsuccessful pleading, I climbed into my brother's bedroom from the second-floor balcony late one night. My brother is sleeping soundly in bed. I slipped into bed, hugged the warm person in my arms, and sighed with satisfaction. My brother woke up in a daze, and when he saw it was me, he kicked me, and I grabbed his foot and clamped it between my legs. Perhaps because he was too sleepy, he fell asleep again. I slept the whole night holding my brother, with dark circles under my eyes from not sleeping well for many days. The next day, when I woke up, the place next to me had become cold. My brother has gone to work. I took out my phone and saw that my brother's name and a female celebrity's name were on the trending searches. The female star is called Jessica Perez. She has played the leading role in several popular TV series and seems to be an artist of my company. A few days ago, Way Group officially announced its spokesperson, and this female star was one of them. In the video that became a hot topic, Jessica was seen looking shy in front of the camera. Me and Thomas? We're just ordinary friends. Only then did I see clearly that this was the woman who appeared in my brother's office that day. There have been people on Weibo revealing that my brother and Jessica have been dating for a long time. My brother kept it a secret to protect Jessica. When I rushed to the company with my phone in hand, my brother was in a meeting. He frowned at me. I forced myself to calm down and obediently went to his office to wait. As soon as I entered the door, I saw that the sofa had been replaced that day. Thomas suddenly changed the sofa. Who knows what they did here that day? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I called Sophia and asked her to remove Jessica from the role of spokesperson and terminate the contract with her. It would be best if Jessica never sees my brother again in this life. There were a few meows from Sophia's end, and she nodded softly, saying that she would handle it. At that time, Thomas had just got off work and was driving home at an intersection without surveillance. I stopped the car and tied him up in my car. My brother scolded me all the way. I turned a deaf ear to them, changed several cars along the way, and got rid of Thomas's men. It was not until we had driven for an unknown amount of time and finally arrived at a small cabin in the primeval forest that I felt at ease to let Thomas go. As soon as the rope loosened, Thomas slapped me in the face. I put the tip of my tongue against the place where I was hit, then smiled and moved closer, putting the other side of my face in front of him. "Brother, I want this too." Thomas's hands suddenly froze in midair, and he was helpless with me. This time I was well prepared. I opened the cupboard and proudly showed it to my brother. We have self-heating rice, self-heating hot pot, and instant noodles of various flavors, everything you need. Thomas didn't say anything. He just stood there in a daze for a while and then slapped himself. "Brother, what are you doing?" I looked at his face carefully from left to right with heartache. It was a little red and swollen. "Don't hit yourself, hit me if you want to." Thomas squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "Get lost." Less than a week passed, and one afternoon, I took out fish-flavored shredded pork rice and curry chicken rice and asked my brother to choose. He collapsed and threw everything on the ground, his voice filled with tears. "I'd rather die than eat this every day. Joshua, if you don't let me go back, I'll die in front of you." 7. I drove my brother back with a sad face, secretly feeling sad that our second honeymoon ended like this. Until we drove out of the no man's land and came across a barbecue stall. My brother, who always looked down on street stalls, sat on a greasy stool and ate 200 skewers. In the end, he ate and cried, and repeatedly praised the boss's barbecue as being better than the 3-star Michelin restaurant. After returning home, I went out for a drink with my good friends Nicholas and Sophia. A few days ago, Nicholas announced at his birthday party that he would inherit the family and his sister-in-law. "I'm busy all day." Miss Sophia was scolded by netizens for entering the entertainment industry and pretending to be a white flower because she had a crush on a female star. It's rare to get together. At this moment I tell them about my brother and I's 2 honeymoon trips. They laughed at me. "The greatest hardship your brother has ever experienced in his life is following you. That's enough. I really feel sorry for him." I didn't comment on their ridicule. Nicholas is successful in love, so I can only pick on Sophia. I, inadvertently, turned my head to show the strawberry mark on my neck, hinting at the gap between us. "You've already entered the industry and met Sarah, and you've even acted in a play together, but there's no progress?" Sophia held the wine glass and leaned dejectedly on the sofa. "You don't understand. I have my own rhythm." After I sneered, I felt a little sorry for her. "How about I sign her and you pursue her?" Sophia refused again and again. "No, her zodiac sign is slow to warm up, so we can't rush her." Nicholas laughed the loudest that day, and it made Sophia and I's ears hurt. We felt like the sky was falling. Until he took out 2 invitations. Sophia and I looked at each other and saw strong envy in each other's eyes. Now the sky has completely fallen. This kid got it right again. I was determined to make my brother fall in love with me as soon as possible and not let him suffer with me anymore. So I started learning cooking at New Oriental and also learned nursing and housekeeping. In response, Nicholas and Sophia mocked me for being a Filipino maid. I retorted, waving the spatula. "Haven't you heard 2 wise words? ? If you want to win a man's heart, you must first win his stomach." What about the second sentence? If you meet a New Oriental chef, just marry him. It's a pity that they don't understand the charm of a good man who is filial to his parents. The saddest thing is that my brother doesn't understand either. Although Nicholas laughed at me, he still gave me an island, saying that it would help me with my forced love. The villas on the island took a long time to build. I accept with pleasure. The 3rd honeymoon had a difficult start, because my brother hired a team of bodyguards to protect me. But I still lay in ambush for a long time, and knocked my brother out and took him away while he was in the bathroom. My brother taught me since I was a child that when dealing with a target, you should kill it with a single strike when it is at its most vulnerable. When my brother woke up and found himself on an isolated island, he seemed much calmer than the previous 2 times. He even looked at the environment with interest, and finally set his eyes on a reef. "If you keep feeding me that, I'll crash into this and die." But to his surprise, this time I was proficient in everything from washing clothes to cooking. My brother looked at me like I was a ghost. During the day, I took good care of my brother. At night, I collect my pay as it should. One night, Thomas leaned back weakly, his whole body shaking. I was about to lower my head to kiss him, but was pushed away. "I'm going back tomorrow." "No. I have important work tomorrow." "You can't leave then." Thomas's face turned red with anger. "I don't work, Where do you think the money for yachts and helicopters comes from? You can work remotely here. There's no internet signal here? Should I send a letter by carrier pigeon? Having said that, I strode out of bed and lifted the red cloth covering the desk. A somewhat old telegraph machine appeared before my eyes. My brother's expression cracked a little. I enthusiastically introduced this telegraph. I bought this at a high price. Don't underestimate it. It's over 100 years old and still usable. The other one is with the special assistant. You can send instructions to him through Morse code. I kindly took out a copy of the Morse code user manual. My brother gritted his teeth. Does he have to type the contract for me letter by letter? I touched my nose guiltily. In theory, yes. The few days on the island were the happiest time of my life. My brother belongs to me completely. Apart from working on the telegraph machine for a while, my brother spent the rest of his time sea fishing and surfing with me. My life is supported by my brother. His dedication has made my life possible. But he took on the responsibility of managing the household and educating me from the age of 15. Never be as wanton as I am. I took Thomas on a surfboard, gliding over the ups and downs of the waves, feeling the power of nature. The setting sun cast a warm golden light on Thomas's hair, and underneath his hair wet by the sea water was a rare smile. This smile was a joy that came from within, different from any before. I couldn't help but be dazed and immersed in this smile. Brother, will you hate me? Do you hate me for depriving you of your freedom, occupying your body and mind, and forcing you to love me? The answer to this question came to me at night when Thomas climbed over my neck and told me, I never hated you. For the first time, my brother returned my kiss. I was so overwhelmed with joy that I hugged my brother and kept deepening the kiss. When we went to bed that day, it was already daybreak. I was so sleepy holding Joshua that I couldn't open my eyes, but I felt extremely happy and satisfied in my heart. Let time go on like this. Make Thomas fall in love with me. But I had a long and painful dream. In the dream, the car my parents and brother were riding in was hit by a large truck, and blood was overflowing from the crushed car. I was only 10 years old when I cried and threw myself into Thomas's arms. In the dream, Thomas touched my head and told me that he was leaving. We can't be together. I cried and chased him, but ended up falling to the ground. I could only helplessly watch him walk away. Brother, don't leave me. I murmured these words when I woke up, only to find that I was already in tears. There was no one beside me. Suddenly, the sound of a helicopter propeller was heard outside the window. When I chased out, I only saw Thomas sitting in a helicopter hovering in the air, looking down at me. Stay here and calm down for a while. I'll send someone to pick you up after a week. The share transfer contract is on the table. I give up everything in Ways Group and transfer it all to you. From now on, Ways Group will be inherited by you, and there will no longer be a Thomas. There is no more relationship between us. I'm no longer your brother. When Thomas finished his last sentence, he turned his head away from me paranoidly. His lips moved slightly, as if he was giving an order, and the helicopter took off. Elder brother. I ran desperately towards the helicopter, but I couldn't reach it until I fell into the sea. The cold sea water swallowed me up, and the waves kept pushing me away from the shore. I was sinking and floating in the sea, my heart aching as if it were being cut by a knife. Don't abandon me. I choked and said that the sea water kept pouring into my throat, choking me and causing me pain. My body became heavier and heavier, and I allowed myself to continue falling toward the bottom of the sea. My whole life suddenly flashed through my mind. My life is short, and most of it has been Thomas. This life is very long, and every moment I spent with him is still vivid in my mind. The last scene was last night. My brother's eyes were wet. He climbed up my neck and told me that he had never hated me. I suddenly had a sense of survival and swam upstream. I can't die yet. I'm determined to find him and ask him for answers. We clearly agreed that we would be together for life, so why don't you want me or Wei anymore? When I swam back to the shore, I was the only one left on the entire island. In my world, there is only me left. It was 3 days later when Nicholas received my Morse code and came to pick me up. Maybe my air pressure is too low. Even those who always liked to joke became silent. As we were almost in Jiangqing, Nicholas patted me on the shoulder. Thomas has announced that he will give all of Wei's group to you, and Wei's is now in the process of handing over the business. I looked at the bustling night view of Jiangqing outside the window and nodded lightly. After landing, Sophia came to pick us up. She drove the car to the fastest speed within a safe range and dropped me off at the entrance of Wei Group. When getting off the car, Sophia held me back. You won't be alone. Nicholas and I will always be by your side. Nicholas took my other hand. Don't be impulsive. But it's okay to be impulsive. We will share the responsibility with you. On the busy street, I looked at my best friend, but the word, thank you, was too distant to be said. I could only fist bump with them in silence, then turned and walked into the brightly lit building. When the building's security guard saw me, he immediately stood up and greeted me, Thomas. I was stunned. They used to call me Wei Xiao and Thomas. At this moment, this name makes me feel an indescribable pain in my heart. I nodded and took the elevator upstairs. I have imagined a lot along the way. Should I act calm, or should I kneel down and cry while hugging my brother? But the moment I saw Thomas, I was calmer than I thought. Why? I looked at Thomas, who was wearing gold-rimmed glasses and was busy looking at the report. I was supposed to come back a week later, but I appeared in front of him at this moment, which surprised him a little. No reason. You hate me? Thomas pursed his lips tightly and said nothing. I acted like usual. Brother, if you didn't refuse, that means you agreed. Yes, I hate you. I held back the tears in my eyes and turned my head away so that he wouldn't notice. I don't believe it. Thomas sat in his chair in silence for a while, then suddenly sighed. Joshua, you have to grow up. I have things I want to do. It's best if we don't have a relationship. But this abrupt separation is hard for me to accept. We were like a real couple that day, walking on the island, surfing and kissing. But one night later, Joshua wanted to break up with me. The thin, only remaining brotherly relationship between us will also be gone. Thomas is gone. I clenched my fists and squeezed my palms until blood oozed out, and I managed to hold back from chasing after him. At this moment, there were only me and my special assistant in the office, and he looked at me strangely. Thomas asked me to assist you in managing the Wei Group for half a year until you are able to manage Wei Group well. I sat down in the chair, which still retained the warmth of Thomas's presence. I won't manage it. Only he can manage it. Seeing that I didn't respond, the special assistant suddenly got angry. How long are you going to keep pestering him? Do you think Thomas can endure your insults for so long if it weren't for guilt? Thomas not only led the Wei family to prosperity, but also raised you for many years. Not only are you ungrateful, you even dared to kidnap him. He paused when he talked about what I did to Thomas, his fists clenched, and his eyes were filled with unremovable anger. You like him? I lit a cigarette and looked up at him. The special assistant froze for a moment, then walked away, leaving only a few words behind. None of your business. Just do your job of managing Wei's company and don't bother him anymore. That night I sat by the window on the top floor and smoked all night. Thomas has secrets that I don't know. He seemed to be doing something and hiding it from me. I recall that when I first met Thomas, it was when my parents and brother died in a car accident. Thomas helped me up from the heavy rain with an apologetic look on his face and told me that he would be my brother, my family, and would take care of me all my life. I don't believe he won't want me to. Since that day, Thomas disappeared as if he had evaporated from the face of the earth. In order not to cause him trouble, I learned to take over the group. Fortunately, I was smart enough to see the initial shape of the design in a week. The special assistant was the happiest about this matter. He couldn't wait to get away from me and find Thomas. He was also very tight-lipped and refused to tell me where Thomas was or what he was doing. Most of the time I am faced with a faint hatred and ridicule every day. Until one day, I went to help Nicholas and deal with his brother Anthony Rivera. That guy Anthony actually had the guts to drug Emily. But after finding out that the medicine had no side effects, I changed my mind and put the bottle of medicine away. And Nicholas's party. Nicholas was with Emily, Sophia was with Sarah, and I was the only one left. Emily is also a fan of Sarah, and the two of them are sitting not far away chatting together. Talk about topics that girls like. Did you find Thomas? Found it. I raised my eyes to look at Nicholas. He left a special assistant with me. The special assistant will definitely go to find him. I arranged for someone to follow the special assistant every day. Thomas is now staying in a villa in the mountains. The security of that villa is very strict, with a bodyguard every 5 steps. Does Thomas have any difficulties? I nodded. Sophia looked at me worriedly. So what are you going to do? I won't give up on him until I die. Nicholas and Sophia both breathed a sigh of relief. Then why are you looking at this bitter and resentful look? I'm sad because that special assistant definitely likes my brother. My love rival is always hanging around in front of me, but I can't get rid of him. Sophia analyzed. Thomas's true identity must be extraordinary. Nicholas suddenly changed the subject and came over with a smile. Are you afraid that he will suddenly return to some identity like in the novels, and have a family fiancé who has been engaged for many years, and then you will have a sister-in-law? Sister-in-law? I smiled with my eyes narrowed, put the half-smoked cigarette in Nicholas' hand, and started shouting. Hey, Nicholas, why are you smoking again? Sure enough, Emily, who was chatting happily not far away, turned her head in an instant. Nicholas, didn't I tell you not to smoke when trying to get pregnant? If you smoke again, we won't have a daughter. Nicholas glared at me, threw away the cigarette in his hand, and hurried over to comfort the man. Wife, I didn't. Let me explain. Seeing Nicholas also get humiliated one day, Sophia and Sarah burst out laughing. I got up, went to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and started crying. Although Nicholas's words were a bit offensive, what he said was not impossible. Thomas is extremely attractive to both men and women. Besides, he hates me. Maybe I will really have a sister-in-law. Sister-in-law? Can they love and understand him as much as I do? After crying for a while, I began to cheer up. Why can't I be my own sister-in-law? As long as I can be with Thomas, I don't care about my reputation. What's wrong with having a sister-in-law for myself? Anyway, Thomas will only be mine in this life. Then I'm my own sister-in-law. The more I thought about it, the more confident I felt, and I called myself sister-in-law a few times in the mirror to encourage myself. It wasn't until I opened the door that I saw Emily standing at the door with an awkward expression. I came to the bathroom. 11. Thomas blocked me from all his accounts. I searched for a long time and finally found Thomas in the only remaining Alipay account. Then I sent a message saying, "Brother, save me." Looking at the small medicine bottle in my hand, usually one pill is enough, but I still took several in one go. As long as Thomas cares about me, he will come back. By the time Thomas found out my location and found me in the hotel room, I was kneeling on the ground in pain, murmuring, "Brother," over and over again. Big drops of sweat kept dripping from his forehead. My clothes were torn into a mess by me, but my carefully groomed hair was still exquisite. I think I have a pretty good face. The moment I saw Thomas, I raised my head with difficulty, and my whole body felt as if it was burning with a high fever. His eyes burned red, filled with desire and tears. She choked up and said, "Brother, I feel so bad." Thomas was followed by his special assistant, who looked at me in surprise. Seeing that Thomas didn't move, I continued to exhale hot breath, the veins on my forehead bulged, and I felt like I was about to explode. I crawled towards my brother little by little. "Brother, I don't know why, but I feel like I'm about to die. Brother, can you help me please?" Thomas looked at me, sighed, and turned to instruct his special assistant. "Go check." The special assistant nodded, turned around and was about to leave, but stopped. "Thomas, what about you?" At this moment, my brother had already helped me up, and when he saw my miserable appearance, his eyes were filled with a hint of heartache. "I'm fine, you can go out now." From an angle where my brother couldn't see, I secretly smiled provocatively at the special assistant. He was so angry that he gritted his teeth, but he didn't dare to disobey Thomas, so he had to go out, and he didn't forget to close the door for us. "Send you to the hospital?" My brother helped me sit on the edge of the bed and reached out to touch my forehead. My eyes were filled with tears and I tilted my head to rub his palm, acting like a spoiled child like I did when I was a child. I don't want to go to the hospital. If I can't get to the hospital, I'll have a burst blood vessel and die. Brother, can you help me please? Smelling the fresh scent on my brother, I couldn't help but get closer to him, and my reaction became even stronger. My brother looked at me in silence, and finally sighed softly. His hands, which were holding the buttons of my shirt, were trembling slightly. I couldn't wait to hug his thin and flexible waist, but he pushed me away with my head. Don't move. I sat down obediently and looked at my brother pitifully as he sat on my lap and kissed my Adam's apple. I resisted the urge to push him down and enjoyed this hard-earned happiness. But apparently my patience is limited. My brother scolded me all night again. He scolded me and I shamelessly kissed his ears. Baby, I miss you so much. The next day, I finally woke up before my brother. He frowned as he watched him sleeping. I couldn't help but kiss him between his brows and held him tightly in my arms, feeling the joy of regaining what was lost. My brother didn't wake up until the afternoon. As soon as he moved, I came over and asked him if he was hungry. My brother pushed me away irritably and got up from the bed. But when he got out of bed, his legs went weak and he fell to his knees. I carried him into the bathroom very tactfully. My brother looked at the scars all over his body in the mirror and couldn't help scolding me. Are you born in the year of the dog? I smiled embarrassedly, but before I could open my mouth, the toilet door slammed shut in response, almost hitting my nose. After my brother came out, I held him tightly in my arms. Brother, I know what you are doing. I only have one request. Don't abandon me. I can help you. I saw my brother looked hesitant. I pursued the victory, using courtesy first and then force. You know I'm a crazy person you can't get rid of. If you leave me alone, I'll go investigate you myself and put myself in danger. Sure enough, my brother scolded me harshly. Don't mess around. I nodded obediently. Brother, I listen to you the most. Then let me go first. I don't understand, Smith. After dinner, I offered to take my brother home. But he was still a little surprised that I knew where he lived. I was driving and when we were waiting at a traffic light, I leaned over and kissed him. I asked someone to follow the special assistant and found his location. My brother pushed me away in disgust. I didn't promise you. I said we can't be together. It's okay. It's just a matter of time. As I drove onto the road, my brother's expression suddenly changed. Wrong. If you can find it, it means other people can find it too. As soon as my brother finished speaking, a convoy of cars came on the road not far behind us, speeding towards us. My brother looked in the rearview mirror with a serious expression and took out his cell phone to make a call. It looks like the old man is dying. I need to go back to the ancestral home. What? The old man is my grandfather. My uncles are afraid that I will inherit the family fortune, so they want to kill me. I quickly organized the information in my brain. It turns out that's what he's been doing. After saying this, he turned and looked at me with a determined gaze. Joshua, can you shake them off? I put away my nonchalant look, gripped the steering wheel with both hands, and drove at the fastest speed. A strong sense of push on the back, accompanied by a surge of adrenaline. Fortunately, I was driving a McLaren today and easily left them behind. But at the intersection ahead, more and more convoys drove in, and dozens of cars surrounded and blocked us, trying to stop us. I dread to think what would happen if I were stopped. At this moment, my brother's life is in my hands. My hands were covered in sweat as I gripped the steering wheel, and I was more nervous than ever before on the track. Brother, do you believe me? My brother looked straight at me and nodded solemnly. The convoy in front of us was driving in the opposite direction to block our way, and was surrounding us from the front and back. I didn't slow down at all and continued driving forward, about to collide with the car on the opposite side. The person on the opposite side seemed stunned for a moment, not expecting that I would not slow down, and out of fear, he slowed down a little. Just a few dozen meters before the collision, I turned at high speed and the car body just scraped the guardrail on the side of the road. A violent jolt threw us up into the air. A difficult move like one in a Fast and Furious movie was created in my hands. One side of the car's tire touched the ground, and the passenger seat of the car was lifted high, and it just passed through the gap in the convoy. The oncoming vehicle and the vehicle behind us were about to collide, and a sudden braking sound was heard on the road. The tires scraped across the ground, stirring up a cloud of smoke mixed with dust. In the brief few seconds that blocked their view, I drove into a tunnel on the side and disappeared from the road. At the end of the tunnel, the special assistant was riding a motorcycle and stopped in the bushes on the side of the road. I unbuckled my brother's seatbelt and asked him to get out of the car. "Can you ride a motorcycle?" "Meeting." "Then you ride your motorcycle back to the ancestral home. They won't expect you to go back at this moment. My special assistant and I will drive on the highway to attract their attention." The train convoy must have thought that Thomas was in my car, and as long as I didn't get caught, his whereabouts would not be exposed. My decision stunned my brother. He frowned and refused. "No, this is too dangerous." I looked Thomas straight in the eye. "Do what you should do." I smiled and turned my head back to cover my wet eyes. "Thomas, let's go." I had never called my brother by his full name, and this one call made him realize how serious I was as never before. Time is running out. The convoy behind us is likely to catch up. I thought about it, then turned my head and looked at the special assistant with a bright smile. "Are you afraid of death? Do you dare to get in my car?" Someone needs to sit in the passenger seat to pretend to be Thomas. My provocation aroused the special assistant's anger. He snorted coldly, opened the car door, pulled Thomas out and sat in. At this moment, Thomas had no choice but to put on a helmet, ride on the motorcycle, and park outside my car window. "Joshua, be careful not to get caught. They will kill you." "Why kill me?" My question made Thomas pause. He twisted the handlebars and the motorcycle roared out with a deafening sound. At that moment, I stepped on the accelerator and followed him. Motorcycles and sports cars were speeding side by side. As we were about to reach the intersection, Thomas moved his arm and I half opened the window. Then I heard him shouting, "Because they know you are my weak spot." The next second, the motorcycle drove to the side road and I continued driving on the road. My heart was beating so hard that I had to raise one hand to cover it to stay calm. I am his weak spot. He loves me. He loves me so much. Special assistant, do you know what a weak spot is? The special assistant looked straight ahead at the road. After sending a message to Nicholas and the others, the convoy appeared in the rearview mirror again, following closely behind me. I didn't expect that we would die together. "Tell me about it." "What?" "You said last time, why did Thomas feel guilty towards me?" The special assistant remained silent for so long that I thought he would not answer me. He suddenly spoke, his voice a little dull. "He killed your parents." My hand on the steering wheel slipped, and the vehicle, which was traveling at high speed, deviated violently from the lane. I hurriedly adjusted the direction and the car scraped along the side of the road, almost falling off the road. "Well, go on." I didn't expect him to be so calm. The special assistant looked at me strangely. Thomas's original name was Timothy Bennett. He was the only son of the Jiang family, the richest family in Jiangqing. The Jiang family has a deep heritage and has been a prominent family since the Ming dynasty. The current generation of the Jiang family is led by Mr. Jiang, Timothy's grandfather. Timothy's father should have been in charge, but God was jealous of his talent and he passed away early. Mr. Jiang is the one who sent his son away. After losing his most outstanding son, Mr. Jiang wanted to train Timothy, but he was too old to do many things. His power was dispersed. The uncles and aunts from the side branches united for the family property, causing the accidental death of Timothy's mother, and then wanted to kill Timothy. I listened carefully and suddenly spoke. In other words, my parents saved Timothy, but they were targeted by the Jiang family and killed in a car accident. In the end, the Jiang family thought that Timothy died in the car accident, but in fact it was my brother who died in Timothy's place. Timothy then changed his identity to Thomas, right? My analysis is well-reasoned. The special assistant sighed, "Yes. So he has always felt guilty about you, pampered you, and tried his best to make it up to you." "No, you are wrong." Question mark. He loves me. Just as Nicholas said. Thomas, or Timothy, such a noble and elegant person, took charge of Wei Group at the age of 15 and developed Wei Group into one of the richest businessmen in Jiangxing in just a few years. The means and strategies are first class. He can be kidnapped by me again and let me force him to love me. We can only say that he did it voluntarily. Otherwise, my little tricks won't work at all. This was also confirmed when I tried to drug myself that night. I was the one who took the medicine, but we were the ones who were moved. But Nicholas and the others didn't expect that I would drug myself instead of my brother. In fact, there is no special reason. It's just that I can't bear to let my brother suffer any pain, let alone make him suffer. That would be worse than killing me. So, I would rather lie on the floor alone and wait in pain for a few hours. But fortunately, the result is good. My words, "he loves me," made the assistant completely speechless. I continued to tease him. After all, there are very few opportunities to show off in front of your love rival. You've been following my brother for so many years, don't you know him well? If he doesn't want to be caught by me, he has 10,000 ways to do it, but why do I succeed every time? Think about it. Think about it carefully. The special assistant really thought about it carefully. After thinking about it, his poker face turned into a black poker face. The convoy behind us followed closely. We had already driven up the mountain road and there was a narrow river on our side. The mountain road was rugged and narrow, and car lights were faintly lit up ahead. Double team from front and back again. There were too many of them for us to avoid. We were in trouble again, and the car was about to be forced to stop, and death would be waiting for us. Even Poker Face's expression hardened and he finally spoke. I never thought that we would die together. I snorted in disdain. Who wants to die with you? I want to grow old with my brother. After saying that, the special assistant rolled his eyes halfway through, and I accelerated violently. Under his frightened gaze, the car turned around and rushed towards the rushing river beside it. The car flew up, crossed the river, and fell heavily to the ground. The strong impact forced me to hold the steering wheel tightly to maintain stability. The convoy behind us was blocked by the river and could only watch us leave from the other side of the river. Fortunately, we are temporarily out of trouble. The special assistant held on to the seat belt tightly, his face pale, as if he had died again. When you went to the United States to study, did you study business or acrobatics? This car makes you drive like you're in a movie. Seeing him frustrated, my smile got even bigger. There's nothing better than showing off in front of your love rival. Until I drove for dozens of kilometers and arrived at a village. There was a flashy Medina yellow Ferrari parked on the side of the road. Nicholas waved at me. Nicholas' car only has 2 seats. You can find a place to hide in the village. I turned off the car and threw it on the side of the road. What about you? I'm going to look for my brother. I'm worried about him. Those people won't let you enter the Ancestral home easily. I know. I got into Nicholas' car, raised my sunglasses to look at him, and snapped my fingers. I will send Thomas to his grandfather even if it costs me my life. The special assistant looked at me seriously, contrary to his previous disdain. I used to think you were just a playboy, but I didn't expect. Never mind, I'll drive your car and continue to lead them away. He reached for my car keys, but I dodged him. Even though I hate you, I still want you to live and see me and my brother being affectionate. I stepped on the accelerator and the car flew out like an arrow. I was driving very fast on the road just now, but others always caught up with me or even blocked me. If, as my brother said, they found out his identity and knew about his years as Thomas, they would understand that I was my brother's weak spot. Then it is very likely that my car has been tagged. That's why I asked Nicholas to pick me up. But that's not enough. I need a chance to enter the Ancestral home in a legitimate way. They need to be kept under close watch and not do anything to us. When I drove all the way to the location of the Ancestral home sent to me by my special assistant, my brother had just arrived on his motorcycle. Nicholas is as bad as ever. He hired a manure cart, which accidentally overturned, and all the contents of the cart were dumped in front of the Jiang family's gate. The Jiang family quickly opened the door and sent people out to clean up. My brother was sitting in my passenger seat at this time, watching the news coming out. His grandfather has been unconscious for half a year and is now hanging on with only one breath left in the small building in the center of the ancestral home. At this moment, everyone in the Jiang family was waiting for him to die so that they could divide up the family property. I always feel that something is wrong about this. But he still drove in quickly while the door was wide open. 15. Soon, we saw a crowd of people standing outside the small building in the center. A group of well-dressed people, all wearing black suits and skirts, covered their faces and cried. Everyone's eyes were on the second floor of the small building. There was greed in his eyes instead of sorrow. The security guards in the manor came to stop my car, but they didn't dare to fight because I was driving too fast. I roared all the way and stopped right in front of the small building. The sound of sudden brakes resounded through the sky, and everyone looked at me blankly. Until they saw Timothy get out of the car. All eyes turned angry. Who dares to enter our ancestral home? Get them out now. The middle-aged man in the lead gave orders with a vicious look in his eyes. The bodyguard at the side took out the spike from his waist and walked towards my brother. Timothy was standing at the front of my car, quietly looking at the second floor of the small building. He was only 50 meters away from returning to his own life. The group of bodyguards came towards us, and I stepped on the accelerator hard. The whistling sound shook everyone present. Even my brother turned to look at me. I stuck my head out of the car window, grinning. If anyone dares to stop Timothy, I will drive my car and kill everyone present. I have only one life left, and those present are all powerful people. If I kill any of them, I will definitely make money. The faces of those present grew serious, and the middle-aged man in the lead was about to speak. The butler beside him ran to him with sweat on his forehead. Someone spread the news that 2 female celebrities were secretly dating nearby. Now the hill outside the door is full of paparazzi and entertainment reporters. Someone has also reported that we have problems with fire safety, and now the police are coming soon. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's vicious eyes suddenly locked on Timothy. You are so cruel. Timothy's voice was cold and thin. Uncle, you sent people to kill me so many times, you are no less capable than me. After saying this, he strode towards the small building. My car followed closely behind him half a meter, waiting for the opportunity to move. Timothy took a step and I escorted him, making people afraid to move forward. Timothy walked in front like a leading warrior, and I was his dormant and brave beast. Amid the tense atmosphere, the curtains on the windows on the second floor of the small building were wide open. The uncle then glanced at the window on the second floor and waved his hand to let them go with a dejected look on his face. The crowd split into 2 sides and followed Timothy with jealous eyes. He walked step by step to the door of the small building and pushed it open. Unexpectedly, the grandfather who should have been seriously ill and bedridden was sitting safely in a wheelchair, looking at Timothy calmly. Just look carefully, you can see the moisture in the corners of his eyes. You're back. Timothy hummed lightly. I have passed all your tests. This sentence made everyone present look pale. Then I realized what was wrong. Although the journey is dangerous, there is a way to escape. Mr. Jiang has been a scheming man all his life. It is impossible for him to just treat the successive deaths of his son, daughter-in-law, and grandson as accidents. With his means, he should be able to find Thomas. However, Thomas has not returned to the Jiang family for so many years, which is a kind of hardship for him. Mr. Jiang is training in air, not simply welcoming back his descendants. Timothy stood behind Mr. Jiang and pushed his wheelchair out. Old Master Jiang looked at the dejected crowd with full energy. Do you really think I'm old and confused and will let you do whatever you want? The uncles and several middle-aged men who had committed the crime all knelt down and admitted their mistakes. It is not your turn to interfere in my family business. The heir to the Jiang family will only be my grandson Timothy. At this moment, Timothy and I looked at each other across the crowd. At that moment, I felt exactly how he was feeling. After years of planning, I was excited to return to my family, but at the same time, there was a hint of sadness. Until everything was settled, Mr. Jiang called me. Are you the kid from the Wei family? I stood up straight and nervously said, Yes, old man. He looked at me and then at Timothy. After looking at Timothy for a while, Mr. Jiang sighed. That's all. That's all. 16. Timothy stayed with the old man for a long time. The name Thomas gradually disappeared in Jiangqing. Timothy's name became famous in one business war after another. Several people in the Jiang family were all retaliated against by Timothy and became bankrupt and sent to jail. Finally one day, I couldn't help but run to Jiang's house to pick him up, and Timothy rolled his eyes and said I was a clingy person. As I drove, I pulled his hand to my lips and kissed it from time to time. I drove into the woods until we reached a lake. Turning to Timothy, he complained. We haven't seen each other for 3 days, 6 hours, and 4,680 minutes. I miss you so much, I said, grabbing Timothy's hand and pressing it against my heart. Timothy's recent fitness has been quite effective, and as expected, his face turned red. I am very good at flattering my brother. Timothy was startled when his special assistant called. The back of the car hit the steering wheel straight on, and the horn of the car rang through the woods, causing a flock of birds to fly up. I held his waist and indulged in it, and while he was trembling, I answered the phone. Timothy glared at me warningly, but could only take the phone. It's just that his breathing was unstable and I was deliberately doing something bad. Soon, the special assistant fell silent and then hung up the phone. Timothy was so angry that he bit my neck. I hugged him and couldn't stop laughing. When I think of the poker face on the other end of the phone, I feel relaxed both physically and mentally. Brother, what will happen to Wei's family after you leave? Exhausted, Timothy lay weakly in my arms. You take care of it. No, the property and I are yours. Timothy's eyes rolled. I continued cheekily. Brother, please support me. I still prefer to be a playboy. You are more suitable to be a Filipino maid. I'm not a Filipino maid, I'm your husband. Seeing that he didn't say anything, I started to act coquettishly again. A real man never talks big. Well, marry me and I'll be your sister-in-law. 17 extra, Thomas's perspective. After his parents passed away, Thomas was left with only one person in his world. At that time, the old man was immersed in the grief of losing his son and was admitted to the hospital. It was during this time that the group of people turned their attention to him, who was only 15 years old. Fortunately, his father had been kind to the Wei family in the past, so the Wei couple secretly kept him. Unexpectedly, during a trip, the Wei couple died in a car accident along with their young son. The boy was the same age as himself, but he died for him. From then on, he became Thomas. When he was young, he also hated his grandfather's inaction. Later, I thought about it carefully. The death of Timothy deceived the Jiang family. It must have been arranged by my grandfather. When he first met Joshua, he was 10 years old. From now on I am your brother, your family, and I will protect you for the rest of my life. Joshua, whose eyes were red and swollen from crying, hugged him carefully and nodded. From then on, there was a person named Joshua in Thomas's lonely life. He is passionate and unrestrained, which is what Thomas longed for all his life. But everyone has his own mission. His mission is to constantly improve himself, to take revenge, and to return to the Jiang family with dignity. Although Joshua is unruly, he has been obedient to him since he was a child. The only time he was really angry was when Joshua got into a fight with a classmate in junior high school and sent the guy to the hospital. When he went to school with a sullen face, the usually arrogant and unruly boy lowered his head and shed tears. They say I'm a child without parents, but that's not true. I have you. At that time, Thomas felt indescribable. Without him, Joshua would have had a happy life. His parents are still alive and he has an elder brother who loves him very much. But I ruined all of this myself. He vowed to be good to Joshua for the rest of his life and try his best to make amends. But she didn't expect that Joshua would fall in love with her. When Joshua confessed to himself, Thomas first reflected on his own educational philosophy and wondered if he had not taught Joshua well. Let him mistake dependence for love. Since he was 15, Thomas has been on guard against everyone. His life has been filled with hatred and he has never thought about any feelings. He was afraid of Joshua's straightforward and passionate love. He was afraid that he was not as good as Joshua thought, and he was afraid that Joshua would hate him if he knew the truth. But when Joshua cried, he softened his heart again. I always feel like just let him be. The days he spent on the island were the most comfortable and leisurely days in his life. There is no hatred, no pressure, and every day I only have to think about what to cook for Joshua and whether to go surfing or sea fishing today. But reality always comes. When the special assistant sent a message via the telegraph, it was stated that the Jiang family had noticed him. His identity is likely to be exposed. He has been very careful over the years. When he heard the news that the old man of the Jiang family was seriously ill, he thought that it might be the old man who was giving him a push. Being with Joshua always makes people forget the hatred. But Mr. Jiang always reminded him of his identity and that he should accept such training and return to the Jiang family step by step on his own. This is his fate. Joshua is the one who breaks all his destinies. He began to fear that the Jiang family would notice Joshua and try to control him by hurting Joshua. So on the island that day, he left Joshua alone, drew a clear line with him, and had no more entanglement. But he didn't expect that the young man, full of sincerity, would once again break into his world. In fact, when Joshua took Chinese medicine and fell to the ground screaming in pain that day, I could have sent him to the hospital. But the words were stuck in my throat. But another voice in my heart was shouting, "Go ahead, admit it, you miss him too." Yeah, that's good, Joshua. No one could refuse him, not even himself. 18 total extras. Things will always go smoothly for people who are compatible. After Sophia and Sarah had been together for half a year, they decided to get married. In fact, when he went to help Joshua and appeared near the Jiang family's ancestral home. To attract attention, Sophia kissed Sarah in public for the first time. Sarah blushed terribly then. Entertainment journalists and paparazzi who heard the news came in droves, trying to capture the scene. This photo was also on the hot search list for several days. Everyone witnessed their love. Netizens were more gentle than expected and wished them a happy marriage. When the Jiangsheng trio finally got what they wanted, Nicholas proposed a party. This wasn't the first time Thomas had met Joshua's friend. I was still a little nervous about suddenly changing from being Joshua's brother to being his boyfriend. Joshua was nonchalant about this. "Brother, be generous." Thomas nodded. However, Joshua's friends turned out to be more friendly and interesting than he thought. In other words, no wonder the three of them can get along so well. It's a bit like if we are not from the same family, we won't marry each other. So he readily agreed to Sophia and Sarah's wedding invitation. The wedding was scheduled in Switzerland. Emily, who just came out of confinement, doesn't want to miss it. Nicholas simply applied for a flight route and took his wife, daughter, confinement nanny and others to Switzerland on a private plane. Joshua asked his brother for a honeymoon trip with a smug look on his face. To this end, the two of them worked overtime in the company for many days and finally made time to start a trip to Europe. At the wedding, Sophia slowly recounted the 12 years she had loved Sarah. The surprise was Sarah. "I like boiling a frog in warm water, but I can't control my heart for you, so I reject you again and again. You know how lucky I was when I found out that you were the frog in the boiling water." The wedding that day was perfect and happy. Sarah didn't throw the bouquet, but handed it to Thomas. Thomas was stunned for a moment, and just as he was about to take it, Joshua snatched it away. Joshua waved the flower and whispered in his ear, "Look, everyone wants to see you marry me." As a result, the two went to Iceland on the night of the wedding. Under the boundless aurora, there are endless icebergs. Thomas was looking up at the aurora when he heard a splash behind him. I turned around and saw Joshua kneeling on the ground, feeling a little embarrassed. "I'm used to kneeling on my legs, brother, give me a hand." Thomas laughed and helped him up. This time, both of them knelt on one knee at the same time, facing each other. Not only that, they were both stunned when they saw each other taking out a ring box from their pockets. The final solution was that Thomas wore the wedding rings he bought on his hands, and Joshua wore the wedding ring necklace he bought around his neck. One day, the special assistant reported to Thomas as usual. Joshua smiled and moved closer to the video, pretending to be surprised. "How do you know my brother proposed to me?" Special assistant? Joshua was very proud of this and posted it on his moments, tagging @to Not only that, they got the marriage certificate at Jeju, specially invited Jeju to the wedding, and even every time they secretly showed their affection and posted on WeChat moments, only he could see it. Just when Thomas and Joshua were traveling around the world on their honeymoon. In the brightly lit buildings of Jiangqing, the special assistant who stays up late to work overtime every day leaves behind the tears of the working people. I must have owed them both in my past life. Everyone always says that the world is full of happiness, but the special assistant thinks that is not the case.